I've always loved having pancakes, and I like pancakes of different styles. Sometimes you go to these different pancake restaurants and they have different styles of pancakes you can get. And some of them are really interesting and they're unique, and yet they kind of all have the same ingredients inside, more or less. So one of the other types of pancakes that I actually enjoy making myself are crepes. Now this is a French pancake that's a very thin pancake, has a little more egg in it than your traditional pancake, but otherwise kind of follows a similar recipe. So I'm going to take you through how I make a crepe. Now, what can you do with a crepe? There's a lot of things you can do with it. You can use them and fill them, or you can eat them just plain. They're really good as they are, and I hope you'll enjoy kind of taking this in. There's some interesting things you can do. Now, traditionally in French cooking, they use a lot of butter in them. And I don't like using a lot of butter, so I cut the butter down considerably. And I use one of my non-stick pans, and that works out pretty well for making them, and I don't have to worry about them sticking or anything, and they actually make a really nice crepe. So I'll take you through that, and we'll talk about them for a minute. Now for this recipe, I like to use my Vitamix. The most important thing is that you get a nice smooth mixture, and I think the Vitamix provides that for you. Plus, of course, it's got the measuring ports on it, and it's easy to pour into the pan, so I like it for a lot of reasons. Now, the first thing I'll do is I'll put a cup of milk in the bottom of the Vitamix. And the reason I put the milk at the bottom is so that I get a nice mixture. If I put the flour in first, the flour tends to clump at the bottom a little bit, so by letting it go around, I actually make a nicer mixture that's nice and smooth. Next up, I'm going to put butter. Now, in a traditional crepe, you'll put 6 tablespoons or more of butter in it. It's a very buttery dish. I like to put about 1 tablespoon in there. I think it's plenty to give it flavor, but cuts back the fat a little bit and doesn't make it as oily and greasy. I think it works out just a little bit better. And then next, I'm going to put in the flour. Now, the flour is about 1 cup of flour, so you have equal parts milk and flour that you put into it. That's what gets the texture you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out about a cup of flour that I'll put in here, and I'll just put it right on top. Once I've got the flour in, I'm almost ready here. There's only a couple of more ingredients I need in this to get it going. So next up, I'm going to put sugar. I need about a tablespoon of sugar to give it the sweetness. And this is the difference between a savory crepe and a sweet crepe. If I want to make a savory crepe, I'm going to replace that tablespoon of sugar with a tablespoon of some herb that I like. It can be a little dill, it could be a little bit of maybe garlic if I want to make it a little spicy. It could be anything I like powdered garlic, something that I like that might actually round out the flavor a little bit and give it something that I can work with. So once I've got that together, I need about 1/3 cup of water just to kind of get a little more liquid in there, and it just kind of evens it out a little bit. The milk tends to be a little bit heavy in that sense. Now you may have noticed I use skim milk. I do like to cut the fat in this part of it too. Normally you'd use whole milk or maybe even cream to get it started. So now I've got my liquid and everything's together. Now I'm going to put in 3 whole eggs. The eggs give it a richness. This is what really makes a crepe is the eggs. I think that makes the really nice texture to it that gives it everything you want. I have no idea how you'd make this vegan, but I've heard that people have. But you really need the eggs and milk to make it come together right. So I'll put my Vitamix on the stand, and I'll go ahead and blend it up for just a minute or so. I just want to make sure that I get a nice smooth mixture that then I can use to pour into my pan. That's it. That's all I'm going to do to it. My entire crepe is ready to go. This will make about a dozen crepes or so when I get it started. So I'll go ahead and just finish mixing it up, and then I'm ready to take it over to the pan and get it started with actually cooking. All right, now over at the pan, I've got it heated up. I've got a nonstick skillet that I've stuck on here. It's about a 10-inch skillet. And all I want to do is put a thin layer, just enough to coat the pan to kind of get it started here. I could make it a little bit thicker, but I really want a thin crepe. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and spread it around. I'll just kind of make sure that the entire surface is covered with about that amount. You can see that it's kind of thin in a few places, but overall it's got a nice thickness to it that'll hold up to something if I put filling in it. But I don't want to make it so thick that it becomes more pancake-like. I really want it to be something that's going to come together and just have a nice thinness to it, and a tiny bit of softness, but maybe a little crunch as it heats up. So I'm going to let it cook on the first side for about a minute, minute and a half or so, and then I'll just go ahead and release it from the edges of the pan, and I can flip it over and cook the other side. I like to cook both sides so that it gets a nice texture on it. You don't have to cook both sides. If you prefer, you could just cook the one side and then just leave it like that and use this for the inside where you're going to put your filling. But I actually like to do both sides. So I'll go ahead and give it one flip and then just leave it on the pan for another minute or so. Then I'll take it off. And when I take it off, I'll just put it on a plate and let it sit for a little while until I'm ready to use it. So it's really pretty easy. This is really not complicated at all. You saw how easily it came off the pan. The little bit of butter helps keep it from sticking in addition to it being a non-stick pan. But as soon as it's ready, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of fold it off. You could fold them in half, you could fold them in quarters, you could leave them whole and put them on the plate, whatever you prefer. I like to roll them up. It's just sort of a personal preference thing, and I'll put them on the plate like that. And I'll get my next one started. And I'll just continue this process until all of my batter is used. And again, just kind of spread it around until you feel like you've got enough batter on there. If it's not enough, go ahead and pour a little more. It'll fill in all the little holes that are there. You want to make sure that you're just getting a nice even coat so that you get some 10-inch rounds. So once this one's done, same thing, I'll flip it and then I'll take it off. It's the same thing, just repeated and repeated and repeated. You can see I've already done several on my right there, but I'm continuing to cook them as I finish this up. So I'll just let these finish out, and I've got just enough batter to make one more left in my container. So I'll go ahead and make that in just a moment as soon as this one's ready. Again, it's just being patient for a minute or so while they get ready. And when you think it's ready, you start to see a little bit of crustiness around the edges and it comes free pretty easily. So again, I'll just roll it over and take it off and put it on the side with the other crepes that are there. And sometimes a little hot, hard to work with, but that happens. So I'll go ahead and put the rest of my batter in there, spread it around, and it should be just enough to make one more. I'll just keep spreading it out just a little bit until I get it filled in almost completely. And that should do it. So this is the last one I'm going to make for the day. I'll go ahead and let it cook for the minute and a half or so, and then I'll flip it over and we'll get the great texture going on the other side too. Same thing, all of them are going to be exactly the same. You just keep repeating the process until they're all cooked and you've got them sitting there. And like I said, you can stack them, you can fold them, you can do whatever you want with them. I like to make them all at the same time and then just work with them when they're done. It works out really well, very easy. I find it convenient. It's really not hard at all. So here we go, this one's ready. This is probably the best looking one I made because over time the pan got hot enough and it made some nice textures on the actual crepe. So this is actually what I want it to look like. If I were taking my time and being really patient and wanted them to look perfect, I would probably do this first and just spend my time heating it up and take a lot of care and make it look really good. But I'm okay with the way it came out. I'm very happy with these. They look really nice. They're ready to use and I can do whatever I want with them. So there you go. That's actually the process of making the crepes. Very, very easy, well worth your time. Another kind of pancake you can make. And now that I've made my crepes, the question is, what can I do with them? Well, of course, you could just gobble them up like this. My kids like to just eat them just off the plate like this. They don't do anything else with them. They'll just pick them up and eat them. They got a little sweetness. The egginess of them makes them kind of nice, and it's a nice dish. But of course, you could do more with them. You can actually put a little syrup on them if you like and just serve them like pancakes. You could actually dust them with a little powdered sugar. You could put a little bit of fruit on them. You could fill them with Nutella and just kind of roll them over with a little Nutella. That's really good. A little chocolate and hazelnut, that works. Of course, if you decide to make the savory version, you could put some other things in it. You could decide to put some mushrooms or some onions or something else, or even some meats if you like meats. You could do a lot of things with it. I've done them a couple of times where it's a savory version that I do with a little smoked salmon. That works pretty well. Now, the other thing you can do is to make them into what's called a blintz. Now, a blintz is really a version of a crepe that then you fill with typically some kind of cheese or some kind of fruit or both, and then you kind of sear the edges of it. You put it on a griddle and you actually sear the edges so it kind of holds together and gets a little crunchiness on the bottom, and then you can actually serve it as a similar thing. It starts off with the exact same recipe that I used, but then you can add something else to it to give it a little more texture and a little more flavor. Now, of course, if you don't want to add the cheese, you can just add fruit. Sometimes we'll do that. We'll just make the crepes and we'll just fill them with fruit. Or cottage cheese works really well. You can use sort of a cream cheese if you want. It's got to be something that's got a little tanginess to it. So cream cheese itself doesn't actually work, but if you add some other things to it, you can make it work. Like a mascarpone is probably a better choice for this because it's got a little sweetness and a little tanginess. But you want to just add something that gives it a little flavor. And you can make it your own. That's what's great about these crepes. If you ever go into one of these stand-up kiosks where they make crepes, they'll give you about 12 different options. They'll do bananas, they'll do chocolate, they'll do hazelnut, they'll do some sort of savory things. You know, the list goes on, so you can do a lot of things with them. If you go into a fancy high-end restaurant, they may have something that's more like I've seen them as like a Suzette, right? Where they do something and they take a little sauce and they put it on top and they flambe them slightly with a little bit of alcohol. And they come out really nice and it's got a great flavor. So you could certainly do that too. So the options are really unlimited with this because you have such a great base you're starting with. So I hope you try making crepes, and I hope you enjoy them.